Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Um, so we've got a question already right off on the back. Sean asks, uh, could I discuss how you transpose, not sure if that's the correct word, tunes to a different keys? Say the tune is in F and you want to play it in F sharp. Yes, that's the right word, transpose. And I teach what I call a transposition formula. If I had known that that was, I think, a chemical, like something you would learn in chemistry, right? A transposition formula. How do I know that? Because I have a article on my website for transposition formula where I spell out what it is that we're going to talk about right now. And I'm constantly getting hits on that page for people looking for something else. And so there's apparently something called transposition formula. But like everything else that I do, that I make up my own words, this has stuck, so I'm going to keep it. Anyway, here's what you do. The first step is to figure out what is the interval. And if it's written, now it's different when you're transposing tunes, but hear me out. If it's written music, let's say you're on B flat trumpet trying to play D trumpet music. The first step is to figure out what the interval is. And the way I like to look at it is you go from me, from the musician to the music stand. So from me to the music stand, if it's B flat to D, B flat to D, B flat trumpet to D trumpet on the music stand. That interval is up a major third. So the next thing we want to do is transpose the key signature first. So if you know you're going up a major third and the music is written, for example, almost always in the key of C if it's a D trumpet part, then you know you have to transpose up a major third, which makes it E. And E trumpet, E, the key signature for E is 4 sharps. Okay, so that's the next step, is figure out what the key signature is by transposing the name of the key signature. Transpose the name of the key signature up or down whatever interval you figured out in the first step. Then once you do that, you play the music, but so like if it's up a major third, we'll keep that for now. Up a major third means that you're going to play, if the note is on a line, you're going to go up to the next line. You don't have to worry about half steps because that's what you take care of that when you do the transpose the key signature. So you no longer have to say, oh, major third is 5 half steps. You don't have to do that. Did I say 5? C to D flat, E, D, E flat, E. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 4. See, I don't count half steps. I don't like counting half steps. I have a whole different way of learning all that stuff. And by the way, a whole different way of teaching all that stuff. So I don't count half steps. I'm not completely aware when I do this stuff of how many half steps are between different notes. I don't, just because I don't do that. I haven't done that since high school. So yes, change the key signature in your head and then go up whatever appropriate interval it is. So we don't go up a major third, we go up a third. Whether major or minor, it's is all taken care of by the key signature. So if the note that's written is an E and you go up a third to G, well, that third has a sharp on it. So now it's going to be G sharp, which is a major third. But you don't have to think that way. You just go up a third. Makes it a lot easier. Now, with transposing tunes, it's a slightly different approach because you're figuring out what that interval is without having to go through that process, right? So um, the interval between F and F sharp is up a half step. So you change the key to F sharp. And then if it's on a space, you go up a line. I mean, yes, if it's on a space, you go up a line. If it's on a line, you go up a space. Same deal as the other one. It's just that with the tunes, ideally, you're going to know what key you're transposing to. And then you just take the original and the new key and then figure out what the key signature is. Now, there are some things that you want to keep in mind. Um, you know how each of the notes in the scale can have a number associated with it. C in C major, C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, and etc. Well, um, every key has that. And when you're transposing, those numbers stay the same. You're just playing those numbers in a different key. So, for example, if we're doing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, 1 1 5 5 6 6 5 4 4 3 3 2 2 1, right? Now, if you want to change that to a different key, you're still starting on 1, but it's 1 of a different key. 1 1 5 5 6 6 5 4 4 3 3 2 2 1. All those numbers stay the same. So the better you get at thinking about what scale degree each of the notes are in that key. Now, the tonalization studies are great for this. Um, and you know how we're supposed to rest between exercises? You can do 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, like that. You can kind of sing the numbers as something to do between repetitions. And that can kind of give you an idea of what, you know, of what the numbers are for each of the different keys. No, you don't have to do that. I think just playing the tonalization studies gets you halfway there, really. Anyway, so that's how I approach transposition. I can tell you, I love transposing. I remember a few years ago, I was playing at the Renaissance Festival. Renaissance Festival just made the news because they sold it and then didn't relinquish it to the people that it was sold to, and it's a long story. Um, but they took the buyers took the seller to court and all that stuff. But anyway, I was at the Renaissance Festival, and he had a piece that um, was in F alto, not F going higher, but F going down. For us, that's down a whole. Uh, what am I saying? For us, that's down a perfect fourth. And so for me, when I first started learning how to transpose, everybody was learning the transpositions. So, like, if you were an orchestra player, you learn down a whole step so you could play B flat music on your C trumpet. You learned up um, a fourth. You learned up a fifth. Um, you learned up a whole step to play D trumpet stuff. You learn anyway. You get my point, right? There were always these pre-arranged transpositions, but I remember there's a friend of mine from El Paso that lives. He's an orchestral trumpet player. I think he was originally in the Sydney Orchestra, and now I believe he's in uh, New Zealand. I believe in an orchestra there. I don't know what symphony he's in, but I think I got that right. His name's Danny Williams. Danny Williams was a friend of mine in El Paso before he moved to Australia. And I remember he had I guess, a short stint in New York or something like that. And he said, Eddie, it was so bizarre. I needed, because, what it was he was in an opera orchestra back then. Now, what's funny about Danny, I think he was at Boston University when the guy that hires me, Daryl Bear, he hires me to do the Renaissance Festival. I think Danny was there at Boston University when my friend Daryl Bear was there. And the guy that plays, I think, at least he used to play first chair in the Phoenix Symphony, I think, um, was also, I think. There's people that came out of that class that are awesome, including Daryl, by the way, are awesome musicians. Anyway, so um, yes, this guy said when he was in the opera, because the opera people are constantly changing the piece to fit their voice. At least that's what he told me. And he had to transpose in all kinds of different directions, weird intervals up, weird intervals down. And I was inspired by his story. And I always wanted to be able to transpose any direction at any interval. That's my goal. So when Daryl at the Renaissance Festival pulled that piece out where it's down a perfect fourth, a lot of people can do up a perfect fourth because that's what we do, like in Tchaikovsky pieces and stuff like that. A lot of people can do that, but down a perfect fourth, that's a struggle for a lot of people. And he would love to pull that out when I was on the gig because I could play it, which is exciting for me to be used like that. You know, the worst thing about I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Sean. Anybody else have questions? I know we're getting into May and people are getting ready for their um, summer plans and all that stuff. Speaking of summer plans, it looks like maybe I'm not going to. Let me open up my mail. It looks like maybe they haven't chosen any of my um, etudes this year because usually by now they inform me. They'll send a rough draft of the etude and ask me if it's okay. And so the release date is the 15th. We're just 6 days away, and I just haven't heard from anybody. So this might be a dud year for me for the Texas All-State Jazz Etudes. We'll see. I'll tell you what I'll do if they don't choose my etudes. I'll put out a jazz etude book. How's that? Huh? I'll put out a jazz etude book. Oh, yes, that's right. Mr. Derek says graduations for young people. There's a lot of that going on too. Yep. I do think that transposition is an extremely important, not just a tool, but a wonderful way to practice. You know, when you transpose, you have to be, I like to use the word master. It doesn't, maybe some people would disagree with me on that. You have to be a master of the key you're reading and the key you're transposing to. This is one of the reasons why, hello, Larry, nice to see you. This is one of the reasons why I say that it's so beneficial. You know, one of the things on the list of benefits to practicing the tonalization studies is that it makes transposition easier. People who do the tonalization studies will find it less difficult to transpose because they will be masters of. The only way you could do the tonalization studies and not be a master of all those keys in the space of a year or two or maybe 3 years is if you're doing them wrong. And what do I mean by wrong? I have some students, I've told them over and over again, but I have some students that they'll just play the first two, three, four tonalization studies in the key of C and come back the next day and do them over again in the key of C. Never go to the other keys. Technically, if that's how you're doing it, it's not even really tonalization studies. The name tonalization comes from the fact that you're doing all the exercises in one key before you move on to the next key. That way you spend more time in all the keys. If you're only doing one key, you're not doing that. And if you're always going back to the beginning, you're not doing that. Now, what I mean back to the beginning, I'm not talking, if you do all 20 exercises, of course you go back to the beginning. I'm talking about the people that don't go through all 20 exercises. That's why I said earlier, they do 3 or 4 exercises and then they quit and then they wait till tomorrow to do it again. I mean, to do the same exercises all over again. Mr. Derek says, here's a question on the tonalization studies. How many days, weeks, months should we spend per key? I'm doing concert G major right now and for the last month. It still does not seem fast and natural. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which one you're doing. What matters most is that you're consistent until the end. So I like the 1 month thing. I like it a lot. I've done it several times myself. Right now, I don't do that. Right now, I do one scale per day. Um, and it takes me about 200 days to get through my sheet, doing one scale per day. But that's because I have so many different skills that I'm working on. Okay. So yeah, um, that's the main thing. Now, for most people, I think what's best, and I say this most people, I think what's best is 5 or 10 days. Um, and what I mean by days is 5 to 10 times going through the exercises. Because let's say for example, if on one day you only do half of them, finish up the other half the next day. Don't try to do 20. In fact, if this happens to me and I do numbers 1 through 19 on one day and I didn't get to do the last one, I will only do the last one the next time. That's how serious I am about that approach. I will do just the one exercise and move on. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often, but that's how I would do it. So let's say you get through, you do the first 12, come back tomorrow, start on number 13, and finish it up before you go on to the next key. Hello, Karen. Karen says, hi, Eddie. I do the tonalization in different keys, but still make mistakes. I put the key in notes on my phone so I remember. That's right. That's good. Maybe I should stay in one key longer. You might want to consider that. Um, how many days are you doing? Is it just one per day? There's, there's benefits one way or the other. There's benefits to doing one a day. There's benefits to doing one key per 5 days. There's all benefits to it. They're just different benefits. Mr. Derek says, sounds like a lifelong pursuit. Well, you got that right. The nice thing about it being lifelong is that takes some of the um so Karen says it varies on how many mistakes I make. So let me ask it this way then. How many times do you go through the 20 exercises before you move on to the next key? Because that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about how many days you do it. We're talking about how many times do you go through the whole 20 before you move on to the next key or the next scale. So when we talk about the 30-day thing, it's not really 30 days because you're supposed to, if you're following my system, you're supposed to take a day off every 6 days. So 30 days is actually going to be a lot longer, not a lot longer, but longer than 30 days. Then, if you have any other reason why you're going to not practice, then that extends the 30 days for even longer. Now, that's 30. So it's not really 30 days, it's 30 times through all 20 exercises in that key. And I actually started trying to get away from talking about days in this context because it's really not accurate. We're not really talking about how many days. What we're talking about is how many times through all the exercises. Now, another thing I struggle with some of the students is that oh, I forgot what I was going to say. I forgot. Sorry about that. We were talking about the mistakes. So some of the students, maybe if I say it out loud, some of the students, what am I saying? um, right, it's not about days. It's so we already talked about some of the students just keep going back to the same exercises in the same key. Um, I don't remember what it was, but one of the other things that just came to mind now is a lot of people won't write it down. You can't do this in your head. You can't do this in your head. You have to have some way to document your progress, or you're not going to do it right. If you're trying to do this in your head, um, you're not getting full benefit of the exercises. Now, documenting doesn't have to be that you're using a logbook or anything like that. When I first started documenting, I would take a post-it and move that post-it to the next key. And that post-it would tell me which one I'm supposed to do that day. And so when we talk about documenting, now I don't do it like that anymore because I think there's some benefit to looking at your dates. There's people that say, thou shalt practice every day. We've talked about this many times. I'm not convinced that even the ones that believe in doing it religiously, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that they are actually practicing every day. If you're not documenting, what proof do you have, even to yourself? So what I use is dates, and I'll show you and I've shown you this before when I was embarrassed to show you. I'm not embarrassed now. You can see behind me on my printer, I've got a notebook. That notebook is open to the page that I keep this on. So let me pull it out. I think I told you guys last week that I'm practicing again. So these dates are filling up nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it takes me a little over a week to go through one column. Okay. And when I put the date, that date shows me shows the future me what I practiced last time. That way, I can read the chart and go to the one that's next on the list. I hope that makes sense. But yes, that's what I haven't done the stuff at the top since I got sick. That's something different. That's for adding new skills. And I might start that part of it back up again. But what we're really looking at is the bottom of the chart. And what I'm trying to say right now is that the dates help me visualize what I'm accomplishing. And the people who don't do this, I'm not convinced they actually know how much they're practicing. And we've talked about this a little bit before, and I don't mind saying it again because every time I talk about it, it helps me to solidify my thoughts on this. But I believe what happens when we don't document, all of this stuff is monotonous. It's boring and monotonous, and we have a tendency when we're practicing to start daydreaming. Now, this is a horror to the people who are into, what do they call it? Mindfulness in their practice time. For for me personally, you guys, I'm not a big fan. You know that I'm not a big fan of mindfulness in practice, right? Um, I'm looking for mindlessness, and I want to daydream while I'm practicing. I want that. But the one of the negative impacts that daydreaming while you practice has is the fact that you can easily forget what you did. So you document your progress. Go ahead and daydream. That's a good thing. Go ahead and daydream. You're going to play better when you learn to do that. But also document so that you can. Documenting gives you the freedom to daydream. Without documenting, you have to concentrate and be mindful and completely aware of what you're doing because otherwise, um, you would never pull any of this stuff off. So I'm a big fan of this documentation thing. You can do it with a post-it, no problem with that. But I like the dates. The dates give you a something to look at that tells you what your progress was. I haven't, by the way, just so you know, and I'm only saying this, not, I don't need everybody to know my business, but I teach this stuff. Um, I teach this stuff. So I feel like it's important to share these things with you, right? I decided, I think Saturday or Sunday, I decided I'm cutting my practice week back to 5 days. And the reason I want to share that with you is because I want you to see that there's nothing wrong with that. And the day I'm taking off is the Friday. The Friday, because of this Q and A, and don't get me wrong, this Q and A is important. Okay, I don't regret this. But because of the Q and A combined with my dialysis schedule, and then the stuff that needs to get done after the Q and A, there's just no time to practice on Friday. So at first I was thinking, well, maybe I'll just do the shortest, easiest routine. Nah, not going to do that. If if I need to, I might do some practice, but no. Um, and if you guys know my one range book, you know that Friday was the other big day. And there's just and that's part of the reason why I made this decision. I decided that my other big day needs to be on a Thursday. And this is why I'm sharing this stuff with you. I want you to see the thought process that goes behind moving stuff around. Because I can no longer do that hypothetical routine, that hypothetical schedule that I put in the One Range book and in the Chops Express book. I can't do that anymore because the Friday is supposed to be more practice, not less. So I decided a week and a half ago to move Friday's practice to Thursday. My first thought was to switch them. Then I thought, no, maybe I'll do an easier routine on Friday. Then I thought, no, it would just be better to not practice. Then my regular Thursday practice is now going to be on Saturday. Unless I have a gig, then I won't practice on Saturday at all. So yes, that's how I'm working it out. I moved the Tyro routine to Wednesday. My Wednesday is kind of full with lessons, and um, and I get out of uh, dialysis at about noon, so I need to have a shorter um, practice on Wednesday. All right, let me see here. Karen says I don't always do all 20 if I'm practicing in a level that has less exercises. Oh, I see. You're doing the tonalization studies out of the books, out of the like the Trumpet Chops books and the uh, uh, Chops Express book. There's nothing wrong with that. So Karen also says, what should a 5-day practice look like? Well, that depends on which day you have to take off. So do you see, I had to put my 2 big days with only 1 day between them. That's not ideal, but because that's what I ended up with, I'm making sure that my lowest routine, my easiest routine is the day between them. So that's the kind of thinking we want to do. We don't want to have um, two uh, like big days back to back. We don't want that. The so you can there's a bunch of different ways you can work that out. And also keep in mind my schedule looks like that because of time constraints. So a lot of times you have to take what I teach and alter it because of the time that you have to practice. So it really is there is no answer to that because we don't know what other day you're taking off. We don't know how far your 2 days are off from each other. So having 2 days off next to each other is going to be an entirely different approach to 2 days off spread out through the week. I hope that makes sense. Oh, she says not Chops Express, but the other books. I have band practice on Monday and Tuesday, so would practice more on Wednesday and Sunday. Wednesday through Sunday. Yeah, so um yeah, you just now I would maybe I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways you could work that out. A whole bunch of different ways. So sorry to give you a vague answer. But yeah, just you know, the one range book, the whole purpose of the one range book was to give you guys that information so that you could fashion a schedule for yourself. That was the whole point. I wanted to give people a way to navigate the books that we've published. Um, anyway, Mr. Derek says you've been playing for decades with several hard days a week. Is it different for those of us that have a lot more development in front of us? That's a hard question. Is it different? All I can do. Well, no, I also have my students too. When I look back at my earlier days using this system, so you ask if it's different. I don't think it's physically different. I think where it might be different is how you apply the mental stuff. That might be different. But no, I can't really. So let me see if I'm understanding. You've been playing for decades with several hard days a week. Is it different? In other words, I think you're asking, is it different? Should you do fewer hard days a week? Oh, yeah, okay. No, it's not different. Because if it's not different at all, if you do the system right and you're not overdoing it, then there's no, you can't get too tired on your hard day. If you're getting tired on your easier days, then something's wrong. You're either not resting enough or you're playing too loud or something. The the only 2 days you should get tired, genuinely tired, are your two big days. Now you can cut back and have one big day. That's the only thing that I would say maybe it's different. You could have one big day and the rest of them be medium and small days. But as far as 5 to 6 days, I don't think there's any benefit to cutting those back like that. All right. Any other questions? Let me put this up. Otherwise, I will lose it and be in trouble. All right. Apprentice wipes me out totally. Pioneer and Tyro feel like I'm not doing enough, but I do know that it's recovery time. That's right. It's like massaging your lips. So, let me tell you something else about these dates, putting these dates. Um, I think that when you put the dates and you look at it, I think it triggers a positive emotional thing. I think when you look at those dates, so let's look at the difference. If you don't document your progress at all, you don't document your progress, and all you're going by when you prepare, let's say you're preparing for a performance, all you're doing is going by how good you feel and how good you think you sound at the time. And then you compare that to somebody um, who has been documenting his progress, dates, if you want to get deeper into it than that, keeping notes. And every time you look at your music, or every time you look at your sheet or whatever, you have evidence that you did the work. How much of a difference do you think that's going to make in your performance? We play differently when we document. We play entirely differently. So I'm a strong proponent on writing this stuff down. A strong proponent. Um, Larry says, should you work on repertoire every session? No, not every session. What what my rule is 50%. So that said, if you only have one session per day, then the answer is yes, but not generally speaking. Um, we want to have half of our practice time be literature stuff. It can be jazz stuff, it can be etudes, it doesn't really matter what it is. And you know, there's this big thing. So many people want to challenge themselves with hard music. And I've been experimenting over the last few years with students, giving them music. Not all of no, you know, it's not I don't do this for every song, but I want the students to have songs that they can already play. And we go through those songs. Those of you who have taken lessons and have got that far with me, some people don't get that far. Um, we have what we call camping songs, right? And why do I call them camping songs? Because we're going to camp out on them. I got that term, camping songs, from the gaming world, right? Um, in the gaming world, the old games, I don't know if you can do that anymore. I don't game anymore. But the old games, You could camp out at a lower level and get your experience points and your armor and your life points and all that stuff. You can boost that up at a low, easy level so that when you go to the next level, you're more prepared for the monsters and obstacles and all that stuff that you face at the higher level. Well, it's a perfect analogy for what I'm talking about here. When you play songs that you can already play, it changes the way you think. It changes who you are. It changes how you feel about your own playing. And think about the alternative. If every time you learn a song, you put that song away and you bombard yourself with something that you can't play, and you keep doing that over and over and over again, you're going to start to think that you're no good. And that's just the mental stuff. What about the playing? I can't tell you how many students I've had that are doing their camping songs. And now here's how camping songs work in the lesson. You just play through the song. Nothing goes in your camping song list that you haven't already finished practicing. If you haven't finished it, that means it doesn't go in the list. You are only in your camping song list. The only songs that go in there are the ones you already know. And I have students that are in like seventh, eighth grade when I started them as beginners. And when I first started this, I told them, you can take these nursery rhymes out of your list when you get more advanced. But you know what? We've left those nursery rhymes in there. Stuff they could play when they were um, beginners. Now they're in seventh, eighth grade, and they play those songs, and it's a delight to hear them. Some of them will ornament, some of them will improvise, some of them will, um, it's they have such control over that song. And I have to believe that when they do that, it spills over into everything else that they're doing. Hello, Jordan. Nice to see you. Aloha. I hope that makes sense. I've been telling people, and I put it in one of the videos. It's in some of the books I'm writing right now. That the true path to virtuosity is not practicing what you can't play. The true path to virtuosity is practicing what you can already play. That's why we do working backwards. You can already play the last measure of the song. You can already play the previous measure of the song. And then when you do those two measures 10 times each, you can already play those two measures together. That's why we do that, so that you can, and the ones that can't play are the ones that have difficulty slowing down. We've talked about that recently, okay? I'm looking in the mirror and pushing this over, and I'm pushing it in the wrong direction. Huh. Okay. All right. So we talked about that recently. Um, Everybody's always trying to do the whole donkey with the carrot thing where the music that they're trying to play is always right out in front of them. The older I get, the more I realize that's not ideal. That's not ideal. What it does to you mentally is disturbing. And yes, I've heard all of the sayings. I've heard all the sayings. And I will never call anybody out because I think these sayings are more cultural than they are um, educational. So, but yes, I, we hear these people talking all the time about how um, you should never practice what you already know, that it's a waste of time. I think that people who, if the people who say that actually genuinely know what they're saying, because I think a lot of times people don't know what they're saying. If they genuinely know what they're saying and actually believe that, it's a very dangerous, poisonous thing. That's not how our minds work. And so anyway, there's people that they they practice too fast sometimes. And that should really be the only time. There are other things really, um, like not being careful before you start. But this thing with the practicing too fast is the worst of it. And we've talked about that. Karen says, "Do you have a blank copy of your practice sheet? I haven't kept one since high school." So here's the deal. I'm currently working on a tonalization method book. It's sort of like the one range book. It's going to be another 6 by 9 book. But it goes into deep, deep detail about the tonalization studies. And when you get that book, it will have a link in it to download all the sheets. I'm going to make a PDF. Actually, not one PDF. It's going to be a bunch of PDFs in a zip file that people can download from the website. I'm thinking about making it free. What I might do is make it free with a code, and you can get the code out of the book. Um, we'll see, but it'll have every different version. I'm not finished writing them out yet, but it'll have every different version of the scale sheets that you'll ever need. I'm calling them worksheets. I wasn't calling them that before, but the more I dig into this book, the more sense that makes. Um, so yeah, just be a little patient. I'm hoping that book. I want to do the Christmas book first. Um, right now I'm stalled because I want to read through the whole Christmas book before we publish it, and I don't think we're even halfway through with it yet. So, but yes, we're gonna finish the Christmas book, and then we'll do the tonalization method book, and when that's ready, we'll have access on the website for everybody that wants those sheets. Okay. All right. Any other questions? We have a lot of errands to run after the Q and A. That's the biggest problem with the dialysis is just how much time it sucks out of my week. If you include the time to get there and the time to get back and get hooked up and all that and get disconnected, it really is like 18 hours a week, almost a part-time job. Not even almost, right? Part-time is up to 20, I think. So yes, we got to run some errands after this. Any other questions? You guys always have great questions. I would love to write a book about this mental stuff. Um, but I still haven't figured it all out yet. I'm still in the process of working my way through the whole thing because there's so much more. I've told you part of it, right? I told you the part about um, how the way the chops work. As you go higher, the movements become more subtle to the point where you can't possibly control. You can't sense it. You can't control it. This would be like high C and higher. And so we've talked about that. But there's other mental stuff like what we talked about today, the mental side of the confidence that you get from documenting. We could call that confidence, right? The confidence that you get from documenting, that's another mental part of it. And I don't completely understand. I recognize it, but I don't completely understand all of it. Same thing with not practicing, but playing through songs you already know. It creates a mental benefit, but I don't fully understand it well enough to write a book about it. I just know that it exists. Mr. Derek says if there's enough for one book, maybe do a sequel. One book now, sequel later. I mean, which book are we talking about now? um, oh yes, the one I'm talking about now, writing the book about the mental stuff. Right. Yes. And what goes hand in hand with that, by the way, is the cultural stuff. The cultural stuff and the mental stuff are like this. There's, I am writing a book right now that I don't even know what it is. And I was writing this morning in this book while I was at dialysis. I was writing about how so much of what we are taught is untrue and only cultural. And I used as an example, the first example I gave was intonation. People want to make intonation make it sound like it's scientific, right? Because you're dealing with frequencies and ratios and stuff like that. There's nothing scientific about intonation. It's all cultural, 100% cultural. But we disguise it with all the numbers and the ratios and all that crap. But the truth is, we can't measure what's going on with the pitch while we're playing. You can put your tuner on, it doesn't tell you anything. Because tuning is not tuning with the tuner. Tuning was playing in tune is playing in tune with other people, right? So, but the other example I gave was you hear so many people say, "Oh, um," and I'm talking about teachers talking about their students. "Oh, you have a closed throat, or you have tension in your throat." And I'm going to tell you, how do they know that? Did they measure it? Did they look? You tell me if I have tension in my throat. Huh? How does this teacher know you have tension in your throat? I'm going to tell you the answer to that. The teacher knows you have tension in your throat because of the way you sound. Let me reword that because that's actually not true, right? The teacher thinks he knows, right? The teacher thinks he knows that you have tension in your throat because of the way you sound. But the truth is, that's all he's got. He has no evidence whatsoever that tension in your throat is actually causing that sound. You can't even measure your own throat. How do you know that your throat has too little tension, too much tension? How do you know that? All you have is what it sounds like. And I'm going to tell you what I've been saying all along. All physical work should be for musical reasons. Fixing tension in your throat. So you have a musical reason, right? You have a pinch sound. You have a nasal sound. The problem is you can get a nasal sound any number of ways. Back in the 80s, it was always the teachers were accusing the students of having closed teeth. And that's just as bad as the throat. That teacher cannot measure your teeth. That teacher has no way of knowing how closed your teeth are or how open they are. All that teacher has is what you sound like. And when a teacher says something like that, he's basically thinking, you have a pinched sound, therefore. But that therefore is not true. That therefore is actually untrue, completely untrue. There's no way for the teacher to know these things. So when we say someone has a pinched sound, that's completely cultural. Do you have to fix it? Yes, you still have to fix it. But the instructions they're giving you to fix it are not based on reality, based on culture. You see what I mean by culture? His teacher taught him, he'll teach his students, and those students will teach the students. It's a culture that's been handed down, handed down, handed down. And then every once in a while, it takes a funny U-turn, or I mean, a funny left turn. And now instead of closed teeth, we're talking about uh, tense tension in the neck, tension in the shoulders. Nobody can tell you that. If you want to fix those things, put your mind on the sound. Put your mind on what's coming out of the bell. Don't worry about all these nonsensical things that people come up with. Larry says, I had a saxophone classmate who that said trumpet players are mental, but I don't think he meant it in a good way. All right, well, that's a great way to end our discussion. All right, thank you guys for hanging out, and we will probably do it again next week. I have another klezmer gig this week on Sunday night. Looking forward to that. Um, all right, guys, we'll see you. Have a great week, and probably see you again next time. All right, bye.